Hi, and welcome to this edition of What's in My Bag. Today I'm going to share with you what I find nifty or necessary for what I do. So let's get started. One of the most important things for any musician to have are pencils. These come really in handy when your conductor wants you to mark something specific or when you keep making a mistake over and over again. It's always important to have as many pencils as possible, and for those mistakes that seem to keep happening, sometimes it's okay to use a very noticeable pen. I actually won this in a game of scale bingo, something that I used to do with the flute studio I was a part of, and I really like it. It's come in handy actually a couple times when I've performed on an orchestral piece and didn't quite know what a certain description meant, and so I could just whip this out and have my definition. I wouldn't say it's necessary for all performers, but it is a really cool introduction to Western classical music, both in terms and definitions about the composers, about different transcription things that one might want to know. So it's a nice little intro book. This is actually really essential to all musicians. I prefer this particular metronome. I got it at, I think, Music Mart in Corpus Christi. You can really get the metronomes anywhere, but I prefer this one because it is both a tuner and metronome. I have a lot of stuff in my bag, and so I try and be efficient with its space, and having both in one device is really, really helpful. This is another item that I won in Scale Bingo. It is just a little musical pouch that holds all my smaller items so that it doesn't get lost in my bag. One item is this silver polishing rag, probably one of the first ones I had as a beginner flute player. Next item is actually a universal pad dryer that is supposed to be washable, quickly absorbing, leaves no residue, and is supposed to replace your cigarette paper or your wood drying paper. I don't typically use it because it isn't as effective as wood drying paper, but it's still nice to have just in case I run out of wood drying paper. Next is a cloth cleaning swab. I actually got this when I played oboe or clarinet, and you just drop the red end and pull through. It's just an easier way to get through some of those longer reeded instruments. Look, we have found a pencil within this music pouch. And next we have earplugs. I actually find this to be really essential, really for any musician, but especially for musicians who play really loud instruments such as trumpets or bagpipes, or even high instruments like piccolos. I used to play piccolo a lot, and I would have to block my left ear while practicing because if I practiced for too long, it would start to affect my hearing. But even when you are playing with other people and it's a very, very long rehearsal and the volume's starting to get to you, it's really good to have these earplugs just for rehearsal's sake, just so you can get through without permanent damage to your ears. Because as musicians, we really value our ears. Next, we have wood drying paper. This is really actually necessary for any keyed players who rehearse for a long time and create a lot of condensation. It affects the actual pitches and just the overall tone quality of the instrument, and so it's really good to have these papers to absorb that moisture. If you don't have wood drying papers, you can use cigarette paper, as I mentioned earlier, or if you're really in a tight spot, I recommend using dollar bills because they're strong enough to absorb the liquid without leaving any kind of residue in your keys or pads. Next is cork grease, and this actually isn't necessary for my flute. I originally got it when I was playing oboe and clarinet. I still keep it around because you never know when your standmate or when a fellow musician might need some cork grease. And look guys, we found another pencil in this magic music pouch. Okay, so this item actually was recommended by a trumpet professor when I was taking trumpet lessons, and it's beneficial to all musicians. I know that brass players are the ones who tend to use it more, but I found it very helpful, and it is a type of exercise that you start off really slow and then you build towards being able to extend your lungs and have a deeper breath, and that way you can actually play for a longer period of time without needing to take a breath, or being able to use your air for vibrato and other musical elements. Okay, this might seem a little strange to have in your performance bag, but I had really bad wrist technique for the first 7 years of playing, and although I have been taught the correct wrist technique and I play with the better technique, I still have that injury, and so every now and then my wrist acts up and I need a brace. I actually prefer this brace because it gives me the support that I need, but I still have the flexibility to play my instrument, because some of the other braces are a little too stiff and I can't play my instrument. So this one allows me to do what I need to do, but also giving me that protection. This nifty little screwdriver kit I highly recommend. I've used it so many times on my instrument, but also for my glasses. And anybody who has a screw on their instrument could really benefit from having one of these. This was actually a gift from my previous flute studio professor, and honestly, I love it, and it just reminds me to keep working really hard for what I want. This journal actually has multiple functions. It started out as a research journal, and then a journal that I kept while I was in Ireland, and then it became my thesis journal. And in the back of it actually is my personal transcriptions of Irish tunes that I learned by ear and write in a way that helps me memorize it without actually having to write out every single note on staff paper. And of course, as you might have guessed, I have sheet music. I have a binder full of American, Irish, English, Scottish contra tunes, and a folder full of music from my tech ensemble. And I have blank manuscript paper for any time I need to transcribe something or write a note to anybody in my section. Now this item, the Hercules flute stand, I also highly recommend for any time you are at long gigs or concerts where you're not playing, or if you need to get up and move around. A lot of our concerts involve musicians sometimes being a dancer, and so I want to have a safe place for my flute. And I've had the Hercules flute stand for 5 years. I've never had a problem with it. You'll notice I have 2 different sizes. The bigger one can hold a flute, a clarinet, or a low tin whistle, and the smaller one are for piccolos or tin whistles, depending on if you're a folk or Western classical musician. Next are your typical stand lights. I use these more when I played in musicals. However, they still come in handy anytime your conductor wants to create a mood or have some theatrics as part of the performance, or even performing for a silent film such as Nosferatu. You don't want to see the band, you want to see the movie, so we hide with our little stand lights. And now we have finally come to one out of the 2 most important parts of this What's in My Bag. I have an Amadeus flute with the extended end joint, so it has the B natural. In my flute case, I have a black silver polishing rag that I use quite often. I have the cleaning rod with it's just a normal handkerchief that I use to clean out the flute. I have some more wood drying paper because honestly you can never have enough. I actually do have a luggage tag that I won again in Scale Bingo that I keep inside my flute case just in case I am ever separated from my flute, which probably won't ever happen. And in the side right there are actually the plugs that the flute came with that most beginners might start with, and you lose them one by one, and I just didn't want to get rid of them. Now if you do have wrist problems like I do, or you just have a hard time holding up the flute with your right hand, this item really helps. It keeps your thumb in place and you're able to have that correct flute wrist technique, and it has been so important in helping relearn how to hold and play the flute. Now this is my wooden head joint. Most Western classical performers will get a head joint like this in order to play Baroque or Renaissance pieces with their modern flutes. I bought this at TMEA, which is a music convention in Texas, San Antonio, Texas, every year. It was sort of an impulse buy. I really didn't need it, but I justified it in various ways. But I actually use it to play folk music, whether it is Irish or American contra or bal folk. I like this head joint because I get that more traditional tone and timbre, but I keep the flexibility of my modern instrument. And we have another strange item in my bag. I borrowed painter's tape from a friend a while back, mainly because my wooden head joint connection is too small for my modern flute, and so I actually have to tear off pieces of tape to keep it from falling in. And if you notice on the previously, I actually have various strips, different sizes, because depending on what ensemble I'm playing with, my tuning is different, and so I have pre-made strips to help just make everything a little more efficient. And honestly, it's really just nice to have in case you need to mark where a person needs to stand, you need to tape down some microphone wires. It's always good to have a little extra painter's tape. And finally, we've gotten to the most important part of this video, the flute bag. I've had this bag for about 7 years, as you can tell by the wear and tear on the front. It has very little damage as far as rips or tears, and it was definitely an impulse buy at Team EA, but I'm very happy with the purchase, and I plan on using this bag until it no longer works. One of the reasons I chose this bag was because it is a hybrid bag, meaning that there are various ways to carry it. You have the briefcase handles, you have the backpack straps, and you have the shoulder strap. For the most part, I use the shoulder strap, but if I am walking long distances or I'm going to be traveling for a while, I use the backpack straps to help any kind of issues with my back. There are also lots of space for all my items, as you have seen, and I actually really like, it's supposed to be a piccolo pouch, but I actually keep my head joint in that pouch. And then you have the main section, and then you have the two front pockets where I keep all the smaller items. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And just a reminder, this is just my performance bag. Everyone else is going to have a different performance bag, what they find nifty or necessary. This is just what I have collected over the years and use on a daily basis.